Ocean's Widow. Book 2 in the Siren of War series. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Charlotte from Google. 1. He died because you left him, my traitorous heart whispered. I wouldn't ask again. We'd searched for wreckage for 3 weeks before even the captain gave up hope, and our coal stocks ran dangerously low. Every morning since the ship had arrived in port, I'd asked at the newsagent as I bought the daily newspaper. Always the same question. Any news of the Travessa? Every day for a week, Mrs. Capper shook her head sadly. This morning I didn't want to meet her pitying eyes and believe that William was lost. I laid my paper on the counter and wondered where she was. Are you going to buy those comic books? The elderly lady thundered. I heard a squeaky sound. Then get out of my shop before I tan your hides. 2 small children bolted out the door, pursued by Mrs. Capper, brandishing a rolled-up newspaper. Once the children were out of sight, she smiled for me. Good morning, Maria. Just the morning paper. I nodded, placing 2 pennies on the counter. She took my coins and tucked them into her till. Aren't you going to ask? This time I shook my head and tucked the folded paper under my arm, shuffling dejectedly out of her shop. The lifeboats reach land. The papers are full of it. The telegram reached London last night. I lifted desperate eyes to her face. If she toyed with my heart, buoying my hopes only to dash them. I slapped my newspaper on the counter. Show me, I begged. The paper crackled as she turned the pages and dragged her finger down the columns until she reached a well-spaced headline that spanned 2 columns. There. You can read it yourself. So close. I stroked the page that could tell me William's fate, or it would if I could only read the words. No. I can't. Please? Now I saw her pity, but it didn't lance my heart the way it had yesterday. She shook out the page and squinted at the close print. Nothing stirs the human mind more acutely or fires the imagination to greater heights than a thrilling story of heroism and endurance at sea. She continued until she found the names of those who died before the lifeboat reached land. What is your sweetheart's name, Maria? McGregor. William McGregor. My voice surrounded his name like a caress, wishing the words were the wonderful man himself. The man who'd saved me, protected me, fought for me and loved me. Whose lifeboat had been separated from mine when the stormy swell tore us apart. Her finger traced the letters as I held my breath. Someone named Jacobali. What sort of strange foreign name is that? I remembered 3 dark-skinned men, grinning at me as they festooned the mess hall with red-painted toilet paper streamers for the chief officer's birthday party. That was the night before the ship sank. All 3 had been named Ali. I wondered which had been Jacob Ali. Now I'd never know. Who else? I managed to say, forcing back tears. Nagi. Another foreign name. Both firemen, it says. Colored men, probably. She gave a sniff. Firemen worked the boiler room. All the men who'd worked with the boilers were the same color, black from coal dust, tinted red and orange in the firelight. I carefully noted her strange comment, intending to ask Aunt Mary about it when I reached home. Where are they? She peered at the paper. Rodriguez Island, it says. Sounds foreign too. Oh wait, the paper says it's in the Indian Ocean, somewhere near the colony at Mauritius. That's almost as far away as India. The other side of the Indian Ocean, as far from me as the ocean could cast him. What were the chances he'd cross that vast distance to return to me? Your sweetheart's alive, girl. Why aren't you grinning from ear to ear? Mrs. Capper demanded. I forced myself to smile. I'll do that when I see him again. I am relieved and happy. I hoped she didn't notice my hesitation as I fought to find the right words. 3 weeks of intensive English lessons with Aunt Mary had helped, but my vocabulary was woefully limited, even with my memory. I'd begun to relive my experiences with William, a little each day and more when I lay in bed, avoiding sleep. Remembering every kiss, every caress and every word that I hadn't understood at the time, but was coming clear the more I learned. He'd said he loved me and wanted no future without me. He'd wanted me to be his wife, but I hadn't understood what he was asking then, and he'd known that, swearing he'd ask me later when I could answer. Never knowing that later might never come. I maintained my smile as I bade her farewell, folded my newspaper under my arm, and headed home to tell Aunt Mary the good news. William was alive. If only he didn't believe I was dead. 2. I almost cried with relief as I trudged home. For the first time, I felt no irritation at my flapping bloomers or constricting bandeau, nor the long skirt that tangled around my legs with every step I took into the stiff southerly breeze. I didn't even notice the fresh Antarctic temperature of the wind. I was so happy. I could love a man without killing him, for William lived. So the news is true and your man is among the living, Aunt Mary greeted me from the front veranda. I nodded and opened the screen door to head inside in search of breakfast. Mary's arm barred my way. Now we didn't spend all those weeks locked in a cabin to keep you hidden from the crew, practicing your English for you not to speak to me. Tell me, Maria. I swallowed. A lifeboat reached some islands on the far side of the Indian Ocean. 2 men died but the rest lived. Including William. I know no more than that, Aunt Mary. Perhaps if you read the newspaper, you can tell me more than I know. She lifted her arm to permit me to pass, but she followed me inside. I think you know more than you've told me, Maria. I need to know what happened to you if I'm to continue to help you, and so will everyone else. All anyone knows is that you're my niece, and we both know that's not true. I remained silent as I cut some bread and spread Aunt Mary's homemade mulberry jam in a thick purple layer across the slightly stale slice. My teeth crunched through the crust and the tart sweetness hit my tongue. I'd never tasted anything this good. Mary poked the coals in the wood stove and added some kindling. She shifted the kettle to the spot over the newly kindled flame, before spooning fresh tea into her immaculate teapot. We're almost out, she said softly. Can you go to the Chinese grocer's this week to get some more? The way you drink tea, we'll be using a tin a week. I nodded. She'd provided me with food, shelter, clothing and the ability to communicate in her language. The least I could do was run errands for her, and hope she would soon tell me how I could repay my debt to her. But not with my secrets. No, I couldn't tell this kind woman about my past. She bustled about brewing tea in silence. As she set our cups on the table, I realized the huge differences between us. Like her delicate china cup and saucer, Mary's impeccable appearance contrasted strongly with my tin mug and layers of ill-fitting clothes. As she poured milk into her cup, turning her dark brew into a creamy opaque light tan, mine remained a translucent murky brown. You should try it with milk, she admonished, but I shook my head and lifted the cup to my lips. I could manage to drink it like this, but the milk seemed to intensify the muddy flavor that made me feel ill. Mary enthroned herself at the head of the kitchen table. This time, I think you know enough English to tell me the truth, and I'll know if you're lying. Let's start at the beginning. Where are you from? I gulped a mouthful of tea, letting the hot liquid burn its way down the inside of my chest. From the islands of Cocos. Far to the north, near India. She nodded slowly. A colonial girl. That would explain your queer notions of clothing and your complete lack of English. She sipped her tea. Who was your father? My father. This question swam perilously close to my secrets. A cable man at Cocos, I said finally. Telegraph cable. Another nod. His name? Tell me his name and yours. I shook my head. My name is Maria. That is all. What about your mother? She lives. Will not see me. I am disgraced. She sent me away. I filled my mouth with tea before I could say any more. Mary's eyes widened with surprise. What did you do? I smiled faintly. I loved a man. A fish man. A good man, but he could not swim. There was a big storm and his boat threw him into the water. The boat sank and he died. Her eyes held more tears than mine, though a tear for Giuseppe already trickled down my cheek. A fisherman. You're a fisherman's widow? Widow. William had used this word to describe me, but I didn't know it. I don't know the meaning of this word. Widow? When your husband, the man you love, dies, then you are no longer his wife. You are a widow. A widow is a wife whose man has left her. I nodded. Fishman, no fisherman's widow. Yes. She leaned across the table and captured my hand. Her fingers were smaller than mine and roughened from hard work, but her grip was surprisingly firm. I'm sorry, Maria. To lose the man you love is a hard thing. How long ago did he die? 2 years, I said. It was longer than that. Giuseppe had drowned in a summer cyclone and we were in the middle of winter now, but the wound was still fresh. He called me Maria Stella Maris, his lady of the sea, who would always save him. And I couldn't. I couldn't save him from the sea. My tears spilled over as if my saltwater heart had burst, and I pressed my face to the table so she wouldn't see my weakness. It's all right. You couldn't save him. No one can fight the ocean. A smile crept to my lips and laughter struggled to escape. I'd fought the ocean and lost, but still I fought. Each battle was a test, the ocean's trial of my strength, for one day I would win. I pressed my forehead harder against the wood, hoping she didn't see my fierce grin. How did you come to be aboard the Traversa? Mary pressed. You weren't on the crew or passenger manifest. Stowaways can go to prison. That's why we hid you from the crew of the Travaine, to keep you safe, and why I told the customs officers that you were my niece. I will tell no one, but I need the truth. I lifted my head but kept my gaze on the reddish-brown timber surface, the same color as the floorboards beneath the table. A man helped me. William McGregor. He promised to take care of me. To make a home for me. I met her eyes to show her the truth in my words. I had no need to lie about William. He was a good man and I hadn't killed him. Mary's sweet smile seemed to warm me from within. Then I'm sure he'll cross the ocean to find you when he can. He'll need to recover from his ordeal and he'll take the first ship back to Fremantle when he finds out that you're alive. We must send a cable to him to tell him the good news. They're expensive though. I don't have the money for it, but if you sell these, you should have enough to send a message. She reached behind her head and undid the clasp on the pearl necklace she'd worn to church that morning. The strand dropped neatly into her waiting hand and she held it out to me. No, I said, pushing it away. I couldn't take her prize pearls. She had given me enough. More than I could ever repay. This would place me even deeper in her debt. I couldn't accept that. Her expression hardened. Did he hurt you? You denied it before, but I saw the marks on your body. You were beaten by a man with larger hands than yours. Is that why you don't want him to know you're alive? Did this McGregor take you by force? No. My emphatic shout shocked me. I paused to catch my breath and my composure. William helped me. He protected me from those who wanted to hurt me. Other men tried. And failed. On the night the ship sank, there was confusion. Chaos. 2 men used it to overpower me. They dragged me into a lifeboat, away from the others. One man, he had a knife. I fought them, and in the waves, the lifeboat tipped over and we were thrown into the water. I held tight to the boat. One man drowned. I drew in a breath. The other, he was bleeding from the blade. Blood in the water summoned sharks. Many sharks. I pushed the lifeboat over and climbed in while the sharks ate him. When daylight came, I looked through the lockers to see if there was anything left for me to eat or drink. I found milk and a sail, then I slept. And the Trevane found me. I closed my eyes tightly. William saw the boat tipped over. He saw the sharks. He wanted to come to my aid, but the captain and crew held him back. He would have died if he had. He will not come looking for me because he believes that I died that night. Your money will be wasted and your message will not work, for he will not believe it. The Maria he knows didn't speak enough English to send such a message. He must see me to know I live. Sell the pearls and send the message, she urged. Please for me. Tell him to come to Fremantle so he can see you again. Mary pressed the pearls into my hands, still warm from her skin. I wavered as the desperation in her eyes touched my heart. She wanted our story to end happily, when shipwrecks never do. I knew this better than anyone. All right. But I'll pay you back for this, I promise. I cannot take more of your charity, Aunt Mary. I'll work and earn the money to repay you for your kindness, while I wait for William to come for me. She bowed her head. I understand. But what will you do? What work do you know? I know fish and I know the ocean. That is all, I said forlornly. For all my hopes, I already felt lost. Her world was still painfully new to me. I think I can help you find a job. A job for a girl who knows fish and the ocean. But you will need a name. Your father's your husband's, as I am Merrill D'Angelo, you must have a last name too. I can't tell you, I replied. I'd hoped. She laughed. Speranza. Hope in Italian. If you won't tell me your real name, you will be Maria Speranza, the young fisherman's widow who lives in Hope. She shooed me toward the door. Go now, get a good price for my pearls and send the telegram. The sooner he hears you're alive, the sooner you'll be in his arms again. She squeezed past me, pulling on her gloves before donning a hat. I need to speak to some friends to see if they can help you. Mary hurried out the front door. I had a goal, a hope for the future. And a name to go with it. Maria Speranza, the widow who lived in Hope. And for the first time I did. 3. A bell jangled as I entered the pawnshop. The bespectacled woman at the counter squinted at me, her eyes flicking up and down my body as if assessing me for sale. She seemed fixated by my bare feet. It's Sunday. We're closed, she announced. Something in the way her eyes wouldn't meet mine told me she was lying. But I must trade these for money today, I replied, placing the pearls on the counter before her. She picked up the necklace and scrutinized the clasp. Where did you steal this? I did not. Hold your tongue or I'll call the police. They'll arrest women just as easily as men, especially for stealing something as valuable as this. Any job is better than jail, even yours. Mystified, I asked, my job? You might be wearing a dress instead of just your underthings, but I can tell one of the whores from the Palms no matter what she's wearing. No self-respecting woman would go out without shoes, gloves and a hat, nor without her dress buttoned up properly so her bosoms aren't showing. I glanced down. The buttons over my breasts had indeed come undone, and I fumbled to fix them. I don't know what could drive a girl to sell her body, but it's honest work that won't land you in prison, girl. You're safer on your back, earning enough money to live until you can find a lonely single man who can take you away from such a life. Other girls have done it. Stealing things that don't belong to you will send you lower than you are already. If you ever want a respectable life, take those back where you got them and get back to the whorehouse before the madam wakes up and finds you gone." She pushed the pearls back to me and pointed out the door. More confused than ever, I stumbled out of the woman's shop and into the street. The Palms was some sort of hotel with red lights where there appeared to be a party every night. The women who attended these parties seemed to enjoy draping themselves over the male guests. I hadn't seen anyone express this sort of familiarity anywhere else in Fremantle. In fact, people barely seemed to touch in public at all. I walked to the corner and turned onto Bannister Street, where the Palms was. There were no red lights on now, the place was surprisingly quiet. I stood on the cold paving outside, wondering why the pawnshop woman had sent me here. "Are you looking for a job?" A woman stepped out of the shadows on the veranda, smoke trailing up from her cigarette, as it shed ash on her stained corset. She looked expectant. "I am," I began cautiously, "but Maria." Mary's voice startled me. "What are you doing in Bannister Street? Come quickly, before someone thinks you're one of their ladies of the night. What would your sweetheart say if he thought you were selling your body?" "Selling my body? What in water would anyone want my body for?" I stared at the corset-clad woman and realization dawned. These women sold their affections to the male patrons of the hotel. There was no love between them. I inclined my head to the smoking girl. "I am sorry. My aunt is calling me." She waved as I hurried up the street to Mary. "I've found a job for you," Mary said as soon as I stepped into the sunshine on Pakenham Street. "One of the fishermen's wives is due to have her first baby soon, and they're a hand short in the market. They need someone young and strong who knows numbers and fish. Do you think you can sell fish, Maria? Tell the difference between one fish and another?" I nodded and smiled. "I believe I can." "Did you send the telegram to your sweetheart?" Mary asked. I fingered the necklace in my pocket, unsure how to explain my confusion to Mary. "Yes," I lied instead. "Good. I'm sure it'll seem like no time at all until you see your sweetheart again." She led the way back to her house. "I hope you like fish. Part of your pay will be in spare fish at the end of the day. I admit I'm quite fond of fresh fish." I followed silently, stroking the string of pearls across my palm. The warm nacre was hard against my cool skin. No pawnshop nor jeweler would see these. I'd hide them in my room until I could return them to her. I'd earn the money myself before spending any on the search for William. One day, when I'd earned enough, I'd return the pearls to Mary and say I'd bought them back from the pawnbroker. She need never know. 4. The scrape and clink of my bicycle sounded very loud in the darkness. The only other sound was the swish as the waves stroked the riverbank, somewhere to my right. It might be the early hours of the morning and dreamtime for most people, but the fishermen had been out most of the night, and when they landed their catch, my workday began. Leaning my bicycle against a boat shed, where at least a dozen others would join it before dawn, I smoothed my skirt as I strode down the jetty to the fish market, where no one seemed to sleep. Waves slapped the underside of the boards, the tide was higher than usual, or perhaps the weather was just rough. Not unusual for the middle of winter, after all. The smell of salt was strong, but the stink of fish gone bad was stronger, and the sleepy seagulls lining the boat shed roof knew exactly what it meant. The fishing fleet was home early. Our fishermen worked in all weather except the worst. When they sought shelter in the harbour, there was a big storm coming and they wouldn't be going out again for a few days. A gust of wind almost blew me against the boat shed, showering me with salty spray. Must be some pretty huge waves for the spray to travel this far over the breakwater, I reflected, shoving open the market hall door. Inside, men carried baskets of fish to the wooden counters where they were being sorted and graded. Their chaotic movements, dodging in and out of each other's way and around the counters, resembled the frantic fish swimming in the live water wells in some of their fishing boats. Hunters moving like prey. I didn't bother to hide my smile. They all knew me well enough to know that such an expression was never far from my face. "Good morning," I called, repeating the greeting or reinforcing it with a wider smile and a nod to each man I passed. "You look fresher than this morning's catch, Maria." "How long have you been working here? 2 or 3 weeks surely," asked Angelo Lacava. I inclined my head. 3 years and 3 weeks more like, but you've given me the same compliment every morning, so thank you once again. 3 years and 3 weeks of trying to forget William, wishing he'd come to claim me and knowing he wouldn't. He grimaced. "You tell Basile you don't want to work for him anymore and come work for me instead." "You're not stealing Our Lady of the Sea, Lacava," Tony Basile called, grinning. "Besides, the boys brought in a surprise this morning. I've been keeping it just for her." He lowered his voice. "I told them to leave it in the well so you can see it alive. The boys don't know what kind of fish it is, let's see how good you are." I winked. "You haven't caught me out yet, Tony. I know my fish. After a long night of fishing, some of you boys can't tell the difference between an octopus and an oyster. Let's see your mystery fish." He smacked a basket onto the counter. "Wait till the sun's up. Can't see a thing till daylight. Can you grade the dewfish? They're the last basket left. I had the boys put away a big one for you. He'll keep on ice until you go home." Mary and I couldn't eat 2 fish in one day, especially not if one was a big dewfish. I smelled something fishier than the scaled bodies I was sorting. "Why are you trying to tempt me with extra fish, Tony? What are you hiding behind that juicy dhuie?" I lifted a particularly large one and pointed its pouting lips at him. "Dad wants to go fish up north at the Abrolhos. He says the weather's better and the fish are bigger. But if we go and you work for someone else, you might not come back to us when we return, and I'll miss you, Maria. Just the thought of you working for someone else makes me want to punch something." I moved the fish just before his clenched fist hit it. "You get jealous just thinking about me touching some other man's fish?" I teased. Tony reddened. "Not just his fish," he muttered, lifting the empty basket onto his shoulder as I tossed the fish into their respective buckets and tipped ice over the top. Shaking my head, I checked that all our stock had enough ice and crossed to Paolo's counter, which was piled high with fish. "Need a hand?" He looked at me as if I was his savior, but one he didn't want to accept. "You know you'll only get in trouble if you help me. I haven't been fishing as long as the others, is all. One day I'll be able to sort as fast as the Basile boys, but until then." Paolo sighed heavily. "Got enough ice?" I peered under the counter. "Looks like it." I raised my voice. "You're all in early this morning. Who else is finished sorting and has time to help Merlino?" My eye swept the men who'd stopped to stare. "Come on, boys. Am I the only one here with the balls to help a new fisherman sort his catch? If he sells snapper at the price of sardines, we'll have everyone wanting cheap fish tomorrow." 3 men who'd been talking quietly until I spoke ambled over, followed by 2 more. It took us 20 minutes, but we had Merlino's catch graded before the restaurateurs and shop owners arrived for the first pick of the morning's catch. I thanked each and every one of them, echoed by Merlino's equally fervent gratitude, and returned to the Basile counter just before a windswept, grumpy Tony reappeared. "It's blowing a gale out there already and the clouds are black," he said, shaking his head. I had to check the boats were tied up securely. "I've never seen weather this bad in Fremantle before. God knows what we're in for. I've heard of cyclones up north, can't be much worse than this." I bit my lip. Cyclones sink fishing boats even when they're tied up. I turned away and busied myself checking the ice levels, knowing I didn't need to. Tony hadn't moved, but I could hear him cursing quietly under his breath. I'm sorry, Maria. I didn't mean to remind you. Fishing's a dangerous job, and it's claimed the lives of good men. The sea's a cruel, jealous mistress. He touched the wood counter as if trying to negate his curse. I nodded and rose. Wind whirled into the building, heralding the arrival of our first customers of the day.